So Apple has now announced two new iPad Pro models, powered by the M1 chip, no less. If you're contemplating buying one of these new iPads, which one should you go for? Well, in this video, what we're going to do is run through the differences between the models and also look at the costs so that we can help you make an informed choice. So the new iPad Pro devices look pretty much identical in appearance to the last two models, and if you're in the market actually for a used iPad Pro, there should be plenty of deals available once these new models have landed. And there really is nothing wrong with these earlier iPads that are based on the A12 chip. In fact, some might ask whether you actually need the performance of the M1 in an iPad. And that's a very good question, one that we'll come back to throughout the video. For the new iPads, we've got the same two sizes. We've got 11-inch and 12.9 inches. Both are available in Wi-Fi only format or Wi-Fi plus cellular. Both of them have got 4 speakers, so you get stereo sound whether you're holding the iPad in landscape or portrait mode. And both have the same 3-microphone front-facing array and the same camera option. When it comes to cameras, there's a new ultra-wide front-facing camera that can detect faces in the frame, and then it crops the frame around those faces. This is a really neat feature because it allows the camera to effectively follow you in the frame. And I'm hoping that this might also fix the slightly uncomfortable camera view when you're video conferencing in landscape mode, due to the camera being off to one side when you hold the iPad that way. Both these new iPads get USB 4 and Thunderbolt support through the Type-C port. Now this should mean faster file transfers from external drives and lots of docking options. Apple are really starting to blur the lines between a tablet and a laptop. And that's a discussion that Pete and I had on this week's podcast. There's a link in the description if you want to check that out. Of course, part of the blurring of the lines is the inclusion of that same M1 chip that is powering the latest Apple computers, which run macOS, not iPadOS. So does this mean at some point in the future these iPad Pro models will be able to run macOS? That's a tempting possibility, but it might not be a realistic expectation just yet. Which raises the question, why put an M1 chip in an iPad? It's not like there are apps on the App Store that don't run well on the current A12 models. And with a few exceptions, I don't think most apps would run noticeably quicker on the M1. So could it be that Apple is planning to bring its Pro apps to iPad Pro? Think about having Final Cut Pro and Logic Pro on your iPad. That would be a pretty compelling proposition for many users. But of course we're speculating, and we need to wait until WWDC in June to find out what, if anything, is coming. And finally, before we get to pricing, we need to identify the biggest difference between the two models, and that's the display. The new 12.9-inch model gets a Liquid Retina XDR display. It's backlit with mini LEDs instead of conventional LEDs. Now what does that mean in the real world? Well, previously this 12.9-inch display had 72 LED backlights, and now it's got something more like 10,000. And these mini LEDs are grouped into a grid with almost 2,600 dimming zones, which provides a much finer control over the lighting of the display. Blacks look more black, and the contrast between light and dark areas can be much greater. In fact, Apple claims a contrast ratio on this display of 1,000,000 to 1. Now to be clear, there's nothing wrong with the older display, the one that's in the 11-inch iPad. But I can see this newer display really appealing to photographers and videographers. Well, of course, if you want the smaller form factor and you don't care about that XDR display, then it'll be the 11-inch. But before you commit, check that you need or want the extra features of iPad Pro over the new iPad Air. You could save yourself some money. Well, of course, if you want that larger XDR display, then it has to be the 12.9-inch model. But price may also be a factor to consider. The 11-inch model starts at £749 in the UK or $799 in the USA. And the 12.9-inch starts at £999 in the UK or $1,099 in the USA. So if your budget can't stretch to £1,000 or $1,100, then you're going to need to be looking at that 11-inch model. And remember too that this price doesn't include Apple Pencil, it doesn't include a keyboard case, and arguably you might need those things to get the most from this package. So I'm going to choose the 12.9-inch model here. The pricing jumps between the various storage options are the same on both the 12.9-inch and the 11-inch model. Our first choice, of course, is finish. You can have space grey or silver as before. And then we have 5 options for storage: 128 gigs, 256, 512, 1 terabyte, and 2 terabytes. That's a lot of storage. How much do you actually need? I've got the 256 gig previous generation model here. I've got lots of apps installed. I use it for photo editing and very occasionally for video editing. And this is my main device for consuming content. But I don't store that content on my iPad, I stream it. And my day-to-day work is all stored in OneDrive and SharePoint. Photos and videos, well, I transfer those to external drives when I'm done. So as a result, I'm only using 55 gigs of my 256 storage. And I expect a lot of people will have use cases similar to mine. So it's probably the case that many people could get by with 256 gigs of storage. And this is a £100 or $100 upgrade over the standard 128 gigs. And I'd say that's worth doing as a minimum. Now, how much storage you need, only you can answer. You need to have a look at what you currently use on similar devices to get an idea. And then a good rule of thumb is to double it. You want to have additional space for temporary files, especially if you're doing photo or video editing. And you also want to future-proof your expensive device as much as possible. On our purchase page here, another step up of £200 or $200 gets you up to the 512 gig version, which is probably more than enough for the vast majority of users. But after that, something interesting happens that isn't immediately obvious from this purchase page. Below 1 terabyte of storage, your iPad comes with 8 gigabytes of RAM. But at 1 terabyte and above, you get 16 gigabytes of RAM. And this makes the storage decision a little more difficult. No iPad has ever had as much as 8 gigs of RAM, let alone 16 gigabytes. So it's difficult to envisage why we need this much memory. The differences, though, between the two values on M1 computers running macOS is much easier to see. But the iPad won't be running macOS, probably. So this may well be a case of hedging bets if you want to buy these devices now. Will Apple reveal something new at WWDC in June to show how we can make the most of this new performance? I'd personally love to see an iPad which switches to macOS when it's docked, but I don't think that's on the cards just yet. And if Apple do release something like that in the future, or if they release Final Cut and Logic on the iPad, then that additional RAM could be important to some users. So you need to factor that into your decision. Of course, you could just wait until June to see what happens rather than taking the risk right now. If you want to have that extra RAM though, you can jump up to 1 terabyte and 16 gigs of RAM for another £350 or $400. And the step up to 2 terabytes is the same, £350 or $400. So at this point, depending on your personal storage requirements, the sweet spots are probably the 256 gigabyte model with 8 gigs of RAM or the 1 terabyte model with 16 gigs of RAM. So I'm going to choose the 256 gig model here. And next I get to choose whether I want Wi-Fi or Wi-Fi and cellular connectivity. It's an extra £150 or $200. Naturally, you'll also need a cellular data plan to go with it. In the States, there are deals available at the moment where you get $200 back after you activate a new data plan with certain providers. But wherever you are, there will of course be pay monthly deals from cellular providers that include both the iPad and the data plan for a monthly fee. I'll just choose the Wi-Fi model, and next I'm presented with the choice of engraving, which is free and optional. Just bear in mind that you're reducing the resale value of the iPad if you have it engraved. And let's just cover these accessories quickly, starting with Apple Pencil. It's the same second generation pencil with the magnetic attachment and wireless charging. If you need one and you don't already have one, it's another £119 or $129. The pencil does enhance the experience, but if budget is tight, you can always add it later. Apple's Magic Keyboard with touchpad turns the iPad into more of a laptop challenger. You get that backlit keyboard, you get that touchpad, but you're also getting the unique stand, which makes your iPad look like it's floating and enables you to adjust your angle of view. It looks fantastic, but it's really expensive, and there are no function keys, unlike the much cheaper Logitech keyboard that I have here. But if you do want it, the 11-inch model is £279 or $299, and the 12.9-inch model is a whopping £329 or $349. I've got a review coming out on the Magic Keyboard, so look out for that. Now, if you already have a Magic Keyboard, it will work with the new iPads, but the fit when the case is closed won't be perfect. It seems that Apple have made a tiny adjustment to dimensions on the new one, so that's just something to be aware of. And the keyboards are available in black or white. So I hope that was useful. If you're holding off buying a new iPad until you see some reviews, then watch this space, because I've popped in an order and I'll be comparing this new iPad Pro with the previous model and also with the M1 Equip Max. So if you're not already subscribed, you know what to do. And why not show some love with a thumbs up? Or not, but in any case, I hope to see you again soon for some more geekery.